This is part 2 of our painting Highway on Highway 41. Now we began part 1 with the understanding of how to draw the composition line of horizon, verticals, strong verticals, reinforcing horizontals that presents and makes what is called a grid. Every painting has a strength. It has a center of interest. This particular painting has some difficulty in that regard because they're all very similar and very horizontal. So what we have to do in a picture like this is to plan diagonals. The diagonal cast shadows will help in the presentation of a more interesting design. The elements of art are things that the artist has inside after years of study. They can just intuitively present contrast and similarity and diagonal lines, vertical lines. They just intuitively know what it is to prepare a composition. In this particular case, we're going to have to search really diligently for a center of interest. Now there is one lone figure, so it looks to me like that might be where I'm going to hit. And how will we do that? How will we draw and captures the attention of the audience? We would do that perhaps with color. And so I'm just going to indicate this fellow, and I'm going to give him a cap, and I'm going to give him a bright shirt, and he's going to become a very important part of this composition. Now, drawing figures and preparing subject matter like this takes a bit of training, a bit of skill, and a whole lot of practice. The artist that is so serious about this work will begin, perhaps even at an early age, and discover this love for working in watercolor and possibly out of doors, plein air painting. This particular picture is done with burnt sienna and yellow ochre, and I'm just going to continue the design into the center building right here, and it is with lines that are done 1/8 of an inch brush, and they're horizontal lines, and these are details. I'm also going to add a bit of the reddish color into this building, and I'll go over that in just a moment, and dull it down just a tad. But it draws strength and attention to this part of the picture. Also, I will add that color and burnt sienna into this little building here. Now this old barn, unfortunately, is gone at this point. I began drawing this about maybe 10 years ago when it just captured my attention. And I've been out there many, many times over the years. We are doing middle value right now. And in the middle value, we add the local color. The local color would be, as I'm doing now, the color of the buildings. The local color usually is in middle value. Now on a bright day with a lot of sunshine, you're not going to see much local color. This painting was chosen to be done later in the afternoon, so the diagonals will indicate this is about a 3 o'clock time. The best time to paint is in early morning, 8 to 10, or possibly 3 to 5 in the afternoon. Now over here, we have the need for a darker shadow side, and I'm going over this, the original first wash with a burnt umber. And this will enhance the color. Now, how do you get middle value? Well, it's actually the very same colors with less water. And then how do you get third value? The very same way, with the same colors but less water. Now I'm going to look under the eave and find this darker color, which is Payne's Gray. I'm still not going to go into dark value, but I'm going to use that color all the way through. One of the wonderful things to remember is consistency. If you do something in one area of a picture, it should happen in all the others. So if you're running colors for shadows of this nature, then you would look to where they fall in other places and under this eave as well. And remembering kind of a little trick or secret it is, if you do windows that are facing the light, they should be left light. If windows are, they're going to reflect the sky usually. So in this case, there are several windows here, and I'm just going to indicate them with a blue. And then I will repeat that pattern over here because there is an opening in this building there. And this seems to be a little bit too strong, so I will lighten it, just like that. Again, these are still underpaintings. Now, there are windows that are facing the light over here, and those windows will be reflecting as well. And I will add a bit of the bluish tint into that, a little bit lighter. All right. Now, one of the fun things to do is scubbling, and we're going to see that done on the roof and also on the trees. I'm going to bring a little bit more strength into the trees behind the house because I'm just about ready to do the finer limbs and twigs on the front tree. So I want to enhance just for a moment right here. And I'm using Prussian blue and I'm using yellow ochre to enhance this area, and it will be producing a green. Now right away, that begins to move into dark value. Prussian blue is a very hard color to use, but it is a pungent and beautiful blue. It stains the paper, so once it's there forever. And the same is true, and I've said this a couple of times, of alizarin crimson. You cannot get it out. Once it's there, it has stained the paper, and it is very strong. And it has a wonderful effect because it gives that contrast that is so needed. These trees have already been started with a different blue, and I'm going to probably leave it with that blue. It happens to be French ultramarine, and I used a brighter yellow with that and probably used cadmium. No, it was New Gamboge. That's another yellow and French ultramarine. New Gamboge is a wonderful yellow. And the reason I use it with French ultramarine is that it has less clay body than yellow ochre. It's the same color as yellow ochre. However, yellow ochre is heavy in its clay content. And when you use that with French ultramarine, what happens is it just turns like mud, and they're not very pleasing. So you might ask, well, how did you figure that out? Well, by trial and error, and mostly mistakes, you find out which blue you should use with which yellow. Now, over here, you could use that Prussian with that yellow ochre, and the color doesn't turn to mud. But if I'd used it here, it would. Now, I'm going to leave those as they are right now. They are different shades, but I kind of like them. All right. Now, the rooftops, we're going to add a little bit of grain in here. And how do we get gray? Well, gray comes from what's left on the palette, believe it or not. And I'll just show you. I'm using the Altman palette this time. It's a round palette, and I love to call this palette gray. And it's kind of what's left over after you've painted a while. And I'm going to go into the building, and I'm going to add some spots that might be shingles or just wearing out, or just places where lightning hit, or whatever you want to call this, but it's distressing. That is, it's distressing the building, not the painting. All right, so we're going to add those markings, and that makes an interesting effect, kind of a shingling, and I'm using that gray that was mixed on the palette. And if I do it over here, chances are it's a really good idea to repeat that plan, do it in other places as well. So I'm going to come over here and just dance around on these building tops as well, and over here as well. So now we kind of have solved the problem of the roof. And here and there we find an opportunity for a lost and found edge. And I'm noticing down in the way here, as I go further down, there happens to be another building, but I'm going to change the coloring for these slats. They're going to be more in a gray tone, because I think enough of that color is enough. Now, the little wagon out in front has a similar effect, but it has a different color. So I'm going to do it that way. And the tires possibly could be indicated just like that. And this is still in middle value. So feeling freer now that I've got this far, I'm going to add a few of these details and not be hesitant, because the picture is coming along pretty well. So here we have the wheels. Now the next and really fun time will be starting right now. And I'm going to do a few of these strokes just like this. And I'm using a rigger, and I chose not to use a frisket. Frisket would be a resist color that you would apply before you do these twigs and branches, and a frisket would hold the white. And I like frisket sometimes, but not everybody does. And it can be a little bit stiff and a little too formal. And I want this to look more natural. So I'm just going to do this a few more strokes in this area. And I'm going to tone it down by graying it with a blue. All right. Now, each of these trees have pretty much the same look to them. And they also have the same kind of cast shadows. So I'm going to catch the drip as it comes down the bottom and just do this. All right. Now I have this little tree. I'm pretty satisfied with it. And each of the rest of these will be done in a very similar fashion. Maybe a little bit more in here and up here a little bit. Now, the background has already been done. You notice that the artist works from the back forward. Over here, the background, that is still a little bit wet, so I want to be careful as I move over in this direction. But there is a tree here as well, doing very much the same thing. The rigger is so much fun. You just put it down and flip it up, and it just does the thinking for you. And wherever it lands, it lands. You know, it's so much more fun to be original and free and just genuinely excited about a subject. When a person is locked into a photograph or copying something else, it just isn't nearly as much fun. So I've done this area, and I kind of like that. And I want to finish some of the work back in here before I do this tree. I'm not quite ready for this as yet. So I'll come back to this next time.